Hello, Jivas. It's your friendly neighborhood pop culture princess coming at ya with a yet another Percy Jackson related video. And this time it's Sea of Monsters book talk. I reread the first five books, the Percy Jackson and the Olympians books, over the summer break, and I wanted to make book talks on all of them. Um, and today, by the time I'm posting this, is going to be Percy's birthday. So, a bit of a background before I get into the details of this book. In the Percy Jackson universe, the Greek gods are real, so are the monsters and nature spirits, and basically every Greek mythological figure is alive and kicking. Percy is a half blood or demigod, and demigods are children of a Greek god and a mortal human being. Demigods have ADHD and dyslexia, and they're hardwired for. They're basically built for battle, so they can't really. You can't really put them in classrooms and make and expect them to be well-adjusted individuals. But yeah, anyways, um, besides that, they also have special powers pertaining to their godly parents. So Percy, being a son of Poseidon, has powers over water and the sea and can bend it to his will, make hurricanes, breathe underwater, etc. etc. Kronos, the Titan lord, the father of the Olympian gods, is stirring and wants to overthrow the gods and rule the world once again because you know why not? And in every book in this series, Percy and friends need to face whatever fresh hell Kronos has cooked up, and they have to retrieve and protect different objects, creatures, and people. Luke was also a half blood who arrived at Camp Half Blood with Annabeth, the daughter of Athena, who plays a very important part in these books. And Luke basically turns evil and helps Kronos rise from Tartarus and overthrow the gods. Luke and Kronos are the primary antagonists in the books and appear periodically to keep the demigods on their toes. I couldn't help but notice how when Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson in the book, in the plot, which we'll get into later, board the Princess Andromeda, which is the ship that Luke is on, Luke mentions their sponsors, which is not something I paid attention to the first time I read the books, but I have now read everything that Rick Riordan has written except for the Kane Chronicles books. The three series that are Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Heroes of Olympus, and Trials of Apollo are basically all connected and are all part of the Camp Half Blood Chronicles. So because now I have read Trials of Apollo, which is like the final installment of the Camp Half Blood Chronicles, I now know that this has much deeper meaning and much deeper importance than one would think when they're reading the second book in the Percy Jackson series for the first time ever. So yeah, so Luke mentions their sponsors, and these sponsors become the main antagonists in the Trials of Apollo books. And this Titan stirring was just the beginning of the end. This is just the first nail in the coffin, the first straw, actually. Just a trailer for what is to come. So, yeah, now that I've read all of the books in the Camp Half Blood Chronicles, I'm able to point out details that I was too dumb to understand back when I was reading these books for the first time. So, this book is the second in the Percy Jackson series, the Percy Jackson Olympian series, set a year after the events of the first book, and follows our demigod Percy as he embarks on a quest to save his satyr friend Grover and procure the golden fleece to save Thalia's tree, which is the tree that marks the entry to Camp Half Blood, a summer camp for demigods, and also reinforce the magical barrier that stops mortals and monsters from trespassing. So Thalia's tree is very, very important to the safety of Camp Half Blood, and it's dying. So they need to get the golden fleece, which is the only thing that could possibly cure it and fix it and make the camp safe again. So the good news for Percy and friends is that Grover and the fleece are at the same location. But the bad news is that it is most definitely a trap. The Titan Lord Kronos is stirring and wants the fleece to heal himself and become whole again. And a demigod's life can never be simple and straightforward. So even though Percy and Annabeth figure out the exact location of the fleece, like they have the exact coordinates, courtesy of the Grey sisters, the new activities director, Tantalus, I hope that's how his name is pronounced, but either way, I don't really care because he just sucks. I don't really care if I'm pronouncing his name correctly or not. So, yeah, Tantalus forbids them from going on the quest and instead chooses Clarice because she won the chariot race. That obviously did not stop Percy and Annabeth and Percy's half brother Tyson from going on the quest anyways. Of course, Percy is the titular character. He needs to go on the quest anyways. He has plot armor. Hermes, the god of messengers and thieves and travelers, packs Percy all the essentials they will need and encourages them to go find Grover and the fleece. Hermes also has his own agenda, obviously. He also hopes that Luke can still be saved. So, Luke is Hermes' son, and he asks Percy to find him and talk some sense into him. But of course, he is blinded with rage and wants to see Olympus destroyed. So, even though Percy, Tyson, and Annabeth make it onto his monster infested cruise ship, Princess Andromeda, Luke is beyond being saved. Yeah. He's just not having it. And he also has no remorse for poisoning Thalia's tree. He is the reason Thalia's tree is dying. He has no remorse for poisoning Thalia's tree. He has betrayed Annabeth, the girl he swore to protect, and his best friend Thalia too, over and over again. So Leah, the actress who plays Annabeth in the Percy series, talked about this at San Diego Comic Con this year and how Annabeth is a lot more vulnerable. Like, you just realize how she's just like a 13-year-old kid and not, the all-wise daughter of Athena. She's all alone. She's just a kid. Chiron is gone. Thalia is gone. Grover and Luke are gone. So everyone she cared about and everyone who cared about her is all gone. And her relationship, her friendship with Percy is like too novel. I mean, yeah, they literally went through hell together in like the last book just last year, but they're still not as close. They've still not developed that sort of closeness in their relationship. So everybody who she cared about and everybody who cared about her are all gone and she's all alone. So we see her being a lot more vulnerable even in the book. But anyways, they do escape Luke's ship and get attacked by a Hydra in Virginia and are rescued, thankfully, by Clarice and her ship, the CSS Birmingham. They aren't on there for long though. Like, they reach the entrance to the Sea of Monsters on the ship pretty quickly and have to get through two sister monsters, Charybdis, is that how her name is pronounced? I'm sorry, I'm not too sure. And Scylla. So they almost die, and Percy is certain that Tyson is dead because he was in the engine room while it fucking exploded. So now they have less than 24 hours to rescue Grover and get the fleece. Percy insists that Annabeth finally tell him what this great prophecy that everybody has been alluding to has been about. And Annabeth finally caves in. She's like, okay, he should know something. He should have a basic, vague idea of what it is about. Annabeth tells him that a demigod child of the big three will decide the fate of Olympus when he turns 16. And Percy figures that that is why Kronos is after him. Like, a lot of things make sense now. So if Percy were to join Kronos' cause, then Kronos would be able to successfully use Percy to bring about the destruction of the gods. So yeah. Happy stuff. But anyways, so after sailing in the Sea of Monsters for a while, they end up at Circe's island and get makeovers. Really looking forward to seeing Annabeth all dolled up. Like, I mean, Leah's already so pretty, and then how they're just gonna make her look like even more like, oh my god, like, oh wow, like Annabeth being all dolled up and Percy on the other hand being turned into a guinea pig. Of course, with approximately 100 pages left in the book, this is obviously not their final stand and this is not their final battle, and they're of course going to get out of there in the nick of time, steal an old sailing vessel called the Queen Anne's Revenge that Percy is able to sail all by himself. Like, it is an old sailing vessel and Percy is just able to will it to like move and to sail across literally like a sea called the Sea of Monsters. Like, it is infested with monsters to the point that it is called the Sea of Monsters, and the mortals conceptualize it as the Bermuda Triangle. No crew, no nothing. Percy is able to will it to sail like this massive fucking ship. King behavior only. Okay, so Percy is obviously pretty shaken up by being turned into a guinea pig and feels scared and jumpy and unsure of everything. And on top of already having lost his baby brother Tyson, like literally 2 seconds ago, he just feels he. I think he also felt really bad from what I remember, because he was not treating Tyson as well as he should have. Like, he felt guilty that he was embarrassed of having Tyson, a Cyclops, as his brother, as his half brother. So he was like embarrassed. He cared about Tyson, but he was really embarrassed that, people are associating him with the Cyclops, and a Cyclops is his half brother. And then, so throughout the book, he had been feeling embarrassed about Tyson, and then all of a sudden he loses Tyson, his baby brother, who he did care about. So it was like, yeah, that's tragic. That's fucking tragic, Percy. That is absolutely horrifying to even like think of. So I cannot even imagine what Percy must have been going through. So he was like pretty demented after everything he had been through. That is how things were going by this point. But then, so Annabeth had also been very weird about Cyclops, and she had been very like snobby and very like, I don't know, she was just being weird and thinking and like talking about Cyclops as if they were like lesser beings. So her distaste for Cyclops is also explained to Percy and the readers. So she resents Cyclops because of a horrifying encounter they had, Thalia, her, and Luke, while they were getting to Camp of Blood for the first time. How all of the monsters caught up to them because of the Cyclops and overpowered Thalia, leading to her death. Fun stuff, a lot of fun stuff. This is like a kid's book and just pretty damn grim. But, anyways, the book also has a lot of other iconic scenes that I cannot wait to see come to life in the show. One of them being the sailing past the island of the sirens, where Annabeth insists on hearing their song because those who hear it and survive become wiser, according to her. So Percy saves her just in time from being eaten by the sirens by propelling the both of them underwater to block off the sound of the siren song and make a bubble around them for Annabeth to breathe. So romantic, top 10 romantic moments ever. Please don't cancel me. I'm not being weird about it. This is just meant to be a joke, and I'm not shipping like two 13-year-olds together. Because I know there's a lot of discourse around how, it's not just like Persabeth as like the couple, it's also like Persabeth, how their journey is very important, how they go from people who like basically hate each other to like, okay, like this person is fine, she gets on my nerves, but like it's okay, I'm willing to tolerate him or her, from like either other perspectives. And then they go from like, okay, I actually consider this person my friend, and then like, okay, I consider this person a very good friend of mine, a close friend, a best friend. And then from there to like, obviously they start dating. So yeah, I'm not trying to I was just joking, please don't cancel me. I have full respect. Yeah, like Persabeth needs to have their arc, and we should not rush into anything, especially because they're minors. When I thought about how she saw her biggest dream of a happy family with her parents and Luke and a whole new world she had designed from scratch, and when she chased after it, Percy chased after her because, of course, it was just an illusion created by the sirens to lure her to them so that they could eat her. But it also seems like a metaphor for how she had imagined her life to be, like her biggest dream and fantasy, and how it didn't really come true, except for the fact that she is the architect for a new Olympus. And like in the final battle between the gods and the demigods and Kronos, a lot of Olympus is destroyed, and she, Annabeth, is appointed as the architect of the gods who makes a whole new Olympus from scratch. But she had who cared about her and who she really cared about at some unconscious level at this point by her side. Like, so her whole dream, her greatest desire is to have her family reunited, like her mom, her dad, and Luke, who she like considers, who I guess like in the books it is pretty evident that she has a crush on him. And is like family to her, and that is her biggest dream, along with obviously redesigning Olympus. But then, so when she is chasing after this like illusion of that dream, Percy chases after her and stops her, obviously, from being eaten. But also, it's like, it's him. Like, they are destined to be together and they are destined to be family. And again, like, family does not just have to mean like a romantic sense. A relationship does not just have to mean like a romantic relationship, but like they are each other's destiny, they are each other's fate, period. Like you can now attach any label to it that you want. You can say best friends, you can say lovers, you can say boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But like they are each other's destiny, and how like her true family is Percy, and he's the one who's like, saving her from herself in a sort of way, that her desire to be wiser is obviously her fatal flaw, which is something we talk about, hubris. And then she's like so sure that this is something she wants to do, this is something she wants to pursue. But then obviously even the wisest of people can make mistakes and things can blow up in their face. But she has Percy right by her side to stop her from destroying herself. Mind blowing. Yep. Like she had imagined like a completely different life for herself, but that wasn't meant to be. Percy was her meant to be. You know what I mean? Like they were meant to be. They were each other's meant to be, and they were each other's fate. So it is like his fate intertwined with hers. I also remember the cast mentioning that they spend more time in the show on the siren scene, like Percival talk about it more than they do in the books. But even here, they did talk about their fatal flaws, or at least Annabeth's fatal flaw, hubris, deadly pride. So she really believed that she could build the world from scratch, minus all the bad parts, just the good parts, and make it even better, even more so than the Olympian gods themselves. It is also at this point that Percy realizes how good the idea of overthrowing the gods and starting all over again feels. So, if someone like Annabeth, who's so wise and so intelligent, is tempted, then other less powerful and wise demigods are bound to keep joining Kronos' cause. So he's also like, yeah, we're pretty damn doomed. Like, yeah, we're cooked. Chat, we're cooked. And he also realizes that his dream of Thalia standing over Kronos' sarcophagus is also pointing at something he hasn't really realized yet, and he is correct. So at the end of the book, after they have procured the fleece and saved Cam by draping it over Thalia's tree, the fleece does its job a little too well. Not only does it pull out the poison, it also pulls out Thalia's spirit and draws her out of the tree. So now another child of the big three is in the mix and can be manipulated by Kronos for his benefit. So the book is overall quite grim, and it is only like chapter 14 onwards that it becomes consistently funny. I talked about this in my Lightning Thief book talk as well. Book 1 was also quite dark, and then so was book 2. Like the stakes are extremely high, the odds are not in their favor, and they have lots of creatures ready to kill them or eat them, but they make it to Polyphemus's island alive. And even though that is the climax of the book, it is hilarious. Like even though like this is where like the tension has peaked, it is like hilarious from like chapter 14 onwards, where like we have hit the climax, and a lot of revelations are also made progressively in the book. Hilarious, consistently funny. And this is where like the book becomes a little light-hearted, because then so Percy consistently cracks jokes and keeps it light even in extremely life-threatening situations. Love him for that. So, a Grover had kept himself alive in captivity by pretending to be a lady Cyclops, weaving his wedding veil, delaying the time by when it would be ready so that Percy could come save him. But Clarice's lifeboat from the CSS Birmingham had gotten there before he and Annabeth did, and she had been promptly captured by Polyphemus, who now wanted her as his bride. So I'm assuming we are probably going to see her in the wedding dress, and like maybe a couple others as like a distraction. I don't know. So like the cast also mentioned that it would not just be Grover in the wedding dress. So like I'm assuming that it most definitely should be Clarice. Maybe others as well. Who knows? Like which would be pretty funny. That would be quite interesting. So while they are fighting, Polyphemus swats Grover and Clarice away, and Percy gets mad. He's like, nobody has the right to hurt my friends like that. And within a minute or two, like, I mean, before that, like, they were not extremely successful in fighting Polyphemus. But, like, after Polyphemus has, like really hurt Grover and Clarice, Percy's like, nobody gets to do that to my friends. Nobody gets to do that to my people. Within a minute or two, he has Polyphemus, a Cyclops, a giant, like 10 times his size, on the ground, pinned to the ground, his sword pointed at his eye, and he would have killed the guy had he not started pleading with Percy. And of course, Percy is like a big old softie. So Polyphemus, being all sad and mopey and like reminding Percy of Tyson, um, is obviously able to trick him into like letting him go. So personal loyalty proves to be Percy's greatest strength and his fatal flaw. So we do see Percy's fatal flaw, and we see how like loyalty towards his friends and towards his people and just towards people in general. And he's just like, you cannot do that to somebody, okay? He's just like, he's so much like James Gunn Superman. Oh my god. So he's just like no, unacceptable. And he just like goes into a frenzy. But then so like personal loyalty is his greatest strength, but also his weakness, because then he was reminded of Tyson, because Polyphemus and Tyson are both Cyclops. So he was reminded of how sad and mopey and like how much Polyphemus basically reminded him of Tyson, and he was like, okay, I'll let you go. But of course, Percy shouldn't have done that. So we basically are, it is proved to us how Percy can go to any extent to save his loved ones and just people in general, but he also hesitates in killing Polyphemus in cold blood because of how much he reminded Percy of his little brother, and how the Cyclops too was a son of Poseidon, how Polyphemus too was a son of Poseidon. So of course Percy has mercy and steps off of him, and the son of a bitch Polyphemus attacks him. But Tyson saves Percy's ass yet again. Tyson's alive. So Percy is definitely not the sharpest nut in the tool shed, but he surprises everyone by figuring out Clarice's prophecy at the end of the book. And the only way to get the fleece across country, all the way from Miami to New York in the nick of time. Love his brain, love how he's just like able to do stuff under pressure. And then also, but also, I mean, Rick Riordan does forget a lot of things he writes, and like he goes against canon all the time, because in the newer books and like the books like the Wrath of the Triple Goddess, basically like Annabeth is not there with Percy and Grover for a while they're like figuring stuff out and like threatening nymphs to get them to give them the polecat back for Hecate's polecat that they were supposed to be pet setting and lost. So like so it is mentioned a couple of times like how Percy is not the best at coming up with plans, and he just like leaves it up to Annabeth, who always saves their ass. But then here, like it is in throughout these books, throughout the original 5 books, we see multiple times how Percy is able to come up with plans and save everyone's ass. So yeah, Rick Riordan just like forgets a lot of stuff, I guess. He forgets what he's written. But anyways, that's besides the point. So yeah, Percy is the one who figures stuff out at the end of the book. And he also found a way to iris message Dionysus at camp to reveal Luke's sinister deeds and plans. So while they confront Luke again at the end of the book, after they procured the fleece and after Clarice is already on the way to take it back to camp, Percy and Tyson and Grover and Annabeth are ambushed by Luke and cronies, and then Percy like is able to figure out how he could do an iris message to Dionysus at camp in order to prove that it is not Chiron who poisoned the tree, but it is indeed Luke. So like I was like, oh my god, love his brain for that. Like love him for coming up with actually like ingenious plans in the heat of the moment. Like I love him for that. I love how the battle between Luke and Percy plays out, like right after this. With the party ponies coming in and wreaking havoc, like their life depended on it. Like I was just waiting because I was like, the party ponies are gonna be here, and they were, and they like, oh my god, they Luke gets smacked in the face twice by an arrow with like a boxing glove attached to it, and his minions are splattered in paint from head to toe. Chef's kiss. Oh my god, this is brilliant. Hell yeah, bro. I was just having the time of my life. And then even after the party ponies have made an exit with the demigods and are safely at their center camp, they're being crazy and headbutting each other for funsies and like teaching Tyson how to operate a paintball gun. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So chapter 14 onwards, the book gets really funny, even though like that is probably where it's the most serious, but it's also where it's the most consistently funny. But yeah, so I reread these books to brush up on all the lore and tiny details I'd forgotten, and damn, Percy had also correctly deduced that the death the fates foretold when he last saw them would happen on his 16th birthday, but he's not yet figured out whose death it's gonna be. And the way this is worded, like Rick Riordan isn't exactly saying that Percy is going to die. Percy simply says the death they foretold is going to happen on my 16th birthday, and it sure does. So I'm like, so it is only after you have read all of the books and then you go back do you realize, like, oh, clever. Ooh, okay. I gotta give you points for that. So yeah, Rick Riordan never explicitly, even though Percy's figured it out, it's not explicitly mentioned. It's not explicitly Percy saying that, oh, it was my death. It's just like the death that was foretold last year when I saw the fates is going to happen on my 16th birthday, and that's it. And he's right, because it's not him who dies, it's somebody else. So Percy doesn't die, but somebody else does. And Percy was on a roll in this book. Like, he was figuring things out. But anyways, I really loved the book. It feels even silly to say that, because it's like, of course, I'm making like God knows how long of a video about one book in the Percy Jackson series, and I want to make a video dedicated to each of the books that Rick Riordan has written in the Percy Jackson universe. And I'm also making a video just for Percy's birthday. Do I even need to say how much I love the books and how much I love this character? Yeah, I think it's just self-explanatory. But yes, so I really enjoyed reading this as well as the other books, and it's now 11 o'clock at night, and I need to edit this video, and Percy's birthday is tomorrow, so I need to get it up tomorrow. So yeah, I feel like that is enough yapping for this video, and I've basically covered everything I wanted to talk about this book. And yeah, so that's it for this video. Follow me and subscribe to my channel if you are also into books, if you're also into pop culture, if you're also into Percy Jackson, if you have recommendations for me, whatever. Just if you're a pop culture princess, if you're a pop culture person just like me, then hit the subscribe button. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching.